3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's Monday. It's Monday. It really is. 7 o'clock. And that can mean only one thing. It's time for Reading the Signs, where me, Comedy John Ryan, and my comedian pals from all over the world are going to be talking about comedy, well-being, why we do it, how we cope. And that's where we need your help. We need you to send us your top tips for well-being. Be part of the show. Drop a comment in the box on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on the mensradiostation.com website. It's going to be a great show, much better than last week. What we're trying to do is think exceptional, which, funnily enough, is the motto of WJ, our show sponsors. WJ are the UK's leading road marking and highway maintenance company. They're working with us, we're working with you. Let's get to it. Well, good evening. Welcome along to Reading the Signs with me, John Ryan, here every week without fail. With a but before press the wrong button there, why not? Before we get to that though, how's your day been? How's your week been? What's been going on in your world? Do let us know. Leave your comments in the boxes. We're interested in finding out how you've got through the week, how you're dealing with your stresses, your happiness, your sadness, all the rest of it. Been an interesting week for me so far. Went to see a musical, Back to the Future, last night, which was absolutely fantastic. Going to the theatre is one of the things that I do to keep myself upbeat and happy. Get really cheap tickets. If anyone wants any info on that, drop me a line and I'll give you the top secret website. So as the nights are going to start getting lighter, I believe now we're 31 days till it gets bright at 7 o'clock. What are you doing to look forward to the spring? Are you a summer person or a winter person? Today, for example, it was raining. It was grey. I thought the day was fantastic, beautiful. But for some people, the day was grey and raining and they didn't have a good day. We all saw the same day, experienced it in different ways. And that's one of the things that we need to concentrate on when we're thinking about well-being and happiness. Moving on to happiness, of course, one of the best things you can do is go and have a good laugh. And where else would you do that but to go to a comedy club? Now, I don't know where you live in the country, but there's always somewhere that you can find to go and watch a bit of comedy. And one of the best places in the country, if you asked any comedian, they will tell you it's Brighton. And one of the reasons for it is because the guy who runs the club in Brighton, one of the UK's top comics, one of the best MCs certainly, and a great writer, also runs a great venue. So I'd be very interested to see how much of all this goodness comes from his personality or how much of it is considered and worked on. People who watch television will always go, oh, well, if you're any good, you'll be on the TV. But those of us who are on the circuit know that's not always the case. I'm sure that myself, like many others, would argue that tonight's guest, Stephen Grant, is as good as anyone that you would see on television. And in a kind of a world that we decided on, would be hosting Michael McIntyre's Roadshow and would be hosting 8 out of 10 Cats. I honestly think there's nothing this guy can't do apart from stay on a bicycle at speed. But I'm sure he'll have his own take on that at some stage. When I first started out, he was one of the first people to trust me enough to give me money to do 20 minutes. He also trusted me with his club to host it, open it, close it, or go in the middle. So a lot of the good luck and good fortune I've had in my comedy career goes down to people like Stephen, who gave me a chance and helped me on my way. And for that reason, I'm really pleased and honoured, in fact, to have him as our guest tonight. So anyone out there, a little welcome for Stephen Grant. Here we go, mate. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Cheers, John. I'm trying to work out what's happening with your backdrop.
It's a Japanese brothel. I'm working part-time, mate, because of lockdown.
I do expect someone to come out fully dressed saying thank you very much for the inspection and disappear again.
Just put the gloves back on. For some reason, no matter how I have the lighting, I look purple like Jim Royal. So I decided to go embrace it tonight, just wear a purple jumper as well. I went to a conference recently. I was talking, and the person before me was talking about how your colour affects your mood. Apparently, purple is a very calming colour.
Sounds. Oh, I was going to say, it sounded almost borderline racist there, to be honest with you.
What's happening? You look younger and younger.
I've heard that before. I've heard that when people redecorate houses and stuff like that, and they They put like a dark red in the bedroom because it's kind of fire and passion or something like that.
Blood, mate. That's for the torture.
But realistically, all that happens is that whenever you go to bed and you're tired, you feel like a failure.
It just makes you really angry. But we won't mention red or football. Not the best subjects for colours or anything. But mate, you're looking younger. You're like Benjamin Button, aren't you? You've got to defy the aging process. There's something going on.
Keep fit. I keep fit. You look well as well, to be honest with you. And I'm not just returning the favour. You genuinely do. I keep fit. I was going to say I look after my skin, but actually I can't remember the last time I did that. Probably months ago. I think I tried to during lockdown. I tried to, lockdown was an interesting one because for a lot of people, they've gone around their lives, especially like me. If you're self-employed or you're really busy, or you have to keep busy because you just don't really know another way of living. You've always said, "Oh, that thing that I'll do that thing when I've got some time." And you're 10 years, 10, 15, 20 years into your adult life, and that time never pops up. And then suddenly lockdown came along. It was enforced free time, especially at home. So anything to work on your house or to work on yourself suddenly became available. And I kind of put together a really decent skincare routine because those are the sort of things you only do when you've got nothing else to work on. I'd love to say that that's the effect. I imagine this is more likely to be a mixture of studio lights.
Isn't it? Fresh air, good living and fresh air, and the love of a good woman.
I think the problem with the love of a good woman is that you live in perpetual fear that it'll evaporate. The advantage of fresh air is that it's normally only a short distance away from where you are. Actually, it's an interesting one, actually, because, we're British. And so our approach to fresh air is, it's a bit pointed because in one hand, you've got this beautiful countryside and country to explore. And the other side is the weather's always quite rubbish. So you've got to get your head around the fact that going out when the weather is rubbish is still great, which we struggle with in this country. So if you there's various sayings, certainly in the cycling and in all sports world, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, which is strictly not true.
Do you have all the gear though? Do you have them special clippity clop shoes?
I've got those things that cleats that lock into your pedals. They're very important in cycling because basically every time you push down a pedal, you're making a bit of effort, and every time you lift your foot with the pedal, you're making a bit of effort. And if you're not attached to the pedal, all the time you're lifting your foot, it's doing nothing.
But it also announces your arrival in coffee shops, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you say that, but like people hate that kind of tap dancing to the counter thing. I think a comic we both know, Jimmy McGee's got a lovely line about here they come, sort of middle-aged, mid-crisis men tap dancing for a coffee. And he's not wrong, actually. Yeah, I am one of those guys, but I was doing it. Either I was doing it long before I had a midlife crisis, or my midlife crisis started ages ago. One of the two.
Either. So where I live, we're not far from like a nice country pub, and all the cyclists come out from London and they stop. And there's nothing finer to see than people just cycle 20 miles having pie and chips and a pint because they've earned it. And then
yeah, it's kind of interesting actually because it's like the whole idea that cyclists stop for like a beer or a coffee and cake, and it's like it's guilt-free cake. I mean, the irony of it is that virtually all cake is guilt-free up until the age of about 28, because you just burn it off, or you're not hungry, or you're busy doing stuff, and then all of a sudden it catches up with you. I don't know. Actually, maybe that's our generation. Maybe we're of a generation, as I am now in my 40s, that people when we were in our 20s, nobody was tapping us on the shoulders or going, don't have cake. They're only doing it if your shoulders had disappeared into your neck.
Yeah.
Then they were tapping on the shoulder saying don't have cake. But so we weren't. But like now, I reckon actually, I say that saying, we've got to an age now where you've got to look at it. But I reckon people in their 20s now, because of their much more, if you like, I was going to say visual lives, but no, because they live so much more in the public and in social media, are probably much more under the microscope about how they look.
Their appearance.
So possibly, we had the golden years of being able to live the life.
But the best years of comedy, best years of cake. Had it all, mate. Had it all. Yeah. So tell us, Steve, where do you fit into your family, sibling-wise? You got brothers and sisters?
I've got a brother in Toronto. I got a mum and dad who are both retired and are living in Budapest, and they're still together, which is
Okay.
one of the maddest things, isn't it? You know, seems to be the numerical minority now. And they're in Budapest, where they're retired. I have 2 kids, and I'm a single parent, but I get on very well with their mum. And the kids are with me just under half the time,
Nice.
which means that I have half a week of bury myself in my work and half a week of I shouldn't bury myself in my work.
Balance, mate. Enforced balance.
Yeah, well, I mean, can we say enforced balance? Certainly enforced variation. I can't remember doing something that I can't remember a Groundhog Day. I think possibly having COVID, or actually when my ex had COVID and she had the kids, because it was so early doors, we didn't know if both of us getting COVID meant that neither of us could look after it. So she kept them until she was so ill that she was going to give them to me, and then that never happened. So I had 13 days without the children, and that felt like Groundhog Day. But yeah, the nature of my life is such that there's the only constant is change.
So when you was a kid, what was you like? Were you funny? Were you academic? Were you popular? What's your story?
Oh, it's three good questions back to back. Was I funny? No, I was quick. If there was something funny that was obvious, I was the first person to come up with it. And my timing was good. I did acting as a kid, you know, like kind of amateur dramatic type things, and they'd always give me the role that had the kind of the quippy character. So I think I was like Luther Billis in South Pacific and stuff like that. And so it's like so when I was kind of doing like kiddie acting, it was always the kind of the silver tongue sort of charismatic type. But certainly my confidence was academic. It wasn't social. I was always very bright.
Okay.
So it sounds like up myself to say it, but I was always
No, not at all.
bright, always top of the class. A quick kind of quite tunnel vision about stuff, which meant that if I didn't get something, I found it difficult to deal with. And I'm really competitive, and I see that in my children now. And actually, I see the negatives of being competitive more than the positives looking back on it now. But at the time, you know, it was go, go, go. And then social, I'm certainly an extrovert, not an introvert. So, you know, I was happy to bound up to people and talk to them about what I want to talk to them about. But, you know, maybe not a huge amount of good friends, and certainly I don't think I'd ever put myself in the looked up to phase, but comedians are nerds and the geeks, and they're wordsmiths, and they're social observers, and you know they deliberately live on the periphery of social groups because you can't observe it with a skewed opinion if you can't look at a painting if you're in the painting, you know, and that's me.
So, like, socially, did you have a lot of friends at school? Were you good at sport? Were you just like a normal guy then, or just a quick?
I had small clumps of friends that sort of stuck with me. More girls than boys, probably because just a bit more sort of sensitive and more of a chatty than a physical guy. When it came to sport, not really a team sport person. I wouldn't say I was last to be picked, but quite close. But good at running, and just kind of sort of lanky and light, so you know, good at that. But I'd had a go at sort of football and stuff like that, but just not really great skill. And actually, I wasn't until my 30s that I started discovering that I was actually quite good at some skill or sports stuff. So it was the minimum I had to do. I did orienteering with my mum and my brother between the ages of sort of 11 and 14, and that's quite a competitive sport. That one is. You think of it as the thing the scouts do with a compass,
running around the woods. Is that it?
Yeah. But it's like, but they use controls and so I think it's all digital now. But back then you'd have a card, and that card would have squares in it, and you'd stamp it, and you would tell you the split times if you're doing a competition event. If not, it would just tell you your total time. And then
would your parents go with you on this, or was it just you and your brother? So this is
it. I can't ever remember a time doing team sports. Always solo.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a kid, do you remember?
I kind of wanted to be an actor. Okay. I like the idea of being famous because I felt like it was kind of vindication of being loud and sort of could. And also I liked acting from a really, really young age. So I thought I'd like to be an actor. But I really enjoyed computers as well, that kind of programming type thing. So everything pointed towards computers. My dad was an actor. He gave it up when he was in his very early 20s. Well, he had a motorcycle accident, and he was in the West End, and they obviously had to replace him. And he was, but by the time he healed, he just didn't want to do it. Didn't want to go back to it. He was kind of pushed into it by sort of very pushy parents. Certainly the way to have middle class pretension in the 50s was to have a child who was a performer, and he was very talented in that way, and so they did it, but he had no interest in it. He just didn't enjoy it. So when I started performing and stuff, he was like, oh god, it's in the DNA, and he was very keen to push me to have a proper job. So I became I was always interested in computers and maths. That was my number one subject, more than anything else. And I started writing computer games like as early as the age of 15. And by the time I was 18, 19, I was then off writing software and straight into a job that you need a degree with, because I blagged it. And that's the thing. I went into an interview. I remember.
Was that your first job then? So you left school, did you go straight to work? You didn't go to university, or?
No, I didn't go. No, I finished sixth form college with A levels in maths, physics, and computers. I was writing jokes to perform to friends and stuff, so I still had this kind of comedy idea. But I got given I was with a girlfriend, and we decided we're going to take a year out. So we're going to take a year out. So I deferred my university entrance for a year, and then I split up with a girlfriend. And then so I was like, oh, what am I going to do for this year? And I thought, I'm going to get a job, because I got a car as well, like most people do when they're 17, 18. They're like, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world. This is independence. I've got to keep it on the road. I've got to have some money. And parents didn't roll me for anything. In fact, actually, when I told them I wasn't going to university, they charged me rent. The day I said I was going to, I went, right, pay rent.
I love them already, mate. I love them. And then they moved to Budapest with the money.
So I kind of applied for a job that required a degree. Right. But because I've been programming computers since I was 15 and I was 18 at that point, I was thinking, I could do this. So I wrote in a letter. I mean, the thing is, looking back at it now, I kind of know why I wasn't socially popular, because I would have been so unbelievably full of myself, including my early days in the comedy world. I would have been so full of myself that it would have been nauseating, I think.
But why would we look down on that? Why would we go? Because in America, all their stars, all their boxers and their sports stars are they put themselves. You meet an American comedian even, and they start telling you their resume within seconds.
Yeah, and they present their credentials, and they use things like power and money as a verification of their worth, whereas we're very embarrassed. And I don't know whether we're worse or they're worse. I mean, the gut reaction is to think that they're worse because it's obtuse and it's vulgar to go, I've got this great house, I've got this brilliant car, I've got all this money in the bank, I'm really successful. Whereas, we always sort of think, well, that's vulgar. We don't like that. But it's their nature of the beast. It's like if you ever, like myself, if you compare a comedy gig and an American comes over and you say, would you like me to say anything before I bring you on? And they go, yeah, can you mention the fact that I've been nominated for a Golden Globe and, I did this? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, because they're going to hate you, mate. They're going to really hate you. Because this is Britain. We want someone to come on and sort of go, oh, I've got an alcohol problem. And go, yeah, he's one of us. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked slightly. So when I interviewed for this computer job, I remember I went in, and I remember the cover letter said, I know you've asked for someone a degree, but I'm just brilliant at programming. Bring me in, I'll tell you how great I am. And I was just so full of myself. And I went in, there's the chair, and I went round the chair, the other side of the desk, and shook hands with the guys. I went, don't get up. I was 18. I was so full of myself. I don't know. I just had this kind of massive inner belief. My parents were a large part of that, and the problem with it is it's great for being confident, but it's awful for humility. It took me.
But did you get the job?
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant. That's one of the best stories ever, mate. Ever. So then, therefore, what was the problem? Why? Someone down the line has told you that is not the way to behave, haven't they?
Girlfriends mostly. That's the thing. It would be, I would get into relationships and they would see me be cocky, over the top, and just and not empathetic enough. which I do possess empathy, but I'd never really demonstrate it. And
Mate,
so
I struggle. I seriously struggle with empathy, so much so that I went on an empathy counselling course to learn how to become empathetic, right? And all that happened was I think persuaded a lot of the other people that you don't need to be empathetic to get on in life. So I kind
how
of,
do they feel about that?
I think some of them felt relieved.
But
But it was,
you learned enough to realise how they felt. So
mate, I've got, apparently, whereas I used to think I lacked empathy, I now realise I've got very strong boundaries. And so there's a project that I'm working on at the moment with men who've been victims of sexual abuse, and it's a very heavy going thing. And when they speak to me, I have to kind of go, look, I can't help but want to go and kill the people who did this to you. I know that doesn't help you, but it satisfies my bloodlust. So therefore, all I can do is go practically. If you need something, this is where you go and get it. But I can't sit here and listen because I don't want to feel how you're feeling. So I don't want to be empathetic.
Well, there is a danger there. I mean, it's the same reason why people don't watch horror films.
Mate, exactly. I don't watch horror films. I don't want to feel like that. That's not my idea of fun.
I know, and a lot of people want to feel like that because they like the idea of that sense of fragility, danger, kind of.
No,
but it's
keep it.
awful for you. If you're an empathizer, that's awful because you end up being that person having a terrible time. But there's somebody in our house with a knife chopping up my family. I'm having a great day.
Well, it's like you break your leg. I'll say, come on, let's go to the hospital. I'll come down to Brighton, pick you up, take you to hospital. But I won't go, oh my God, I can imagine what that must feel like, because I can't. And I won't go, oh, well, yeah, I see you broke your leg. But there was this time when I broke my leg. I don't do that. I won't hijack your feelings. And what I like about people like yourself is that I won't see you for 2 years and I'll see you. I just like saw you yesterday because we're both, I guess, socially awkward or socially unconventional. And when you go to
nature of our industry is that you make strong relationships with people that you might not see for 2 or 3 years. Yeah. It's kind of weird. It's I always think, when you're on a bus or even on a train and you're sat near the front, I should say, so more specifically a bus, and you see the other bus driver coming towards that bus. I always look to see if the driver coming the other way waves, because then those two bus drivers get on.
Yeah, there's some sort of connection.
But if you drive a bus, you work on your own. So that person sees them in the depot for what, like 12 seconds, past them in the corridor. You all right, mate? Yeah, fine. Yeah. Maybe gets pissed with them at the Christmas do for 20 minutes once a year. And that is comics. We're bus drivers, right? Well, we do our job on our own. We're very aware of everybody else's job, and we get to interact with them, for a tiny period of the year. And then we just go, oh yeah, great. I worked with them for 9 years. But if you were to total it up, you've actually talked to them for maybe a day and a half.
Yeah. Well, I've just been watching reruns of On the Buses, so this is probably not the best conversation to have.
But so that's the nature of the beast. We are social characters in individual jobs. We are lighthouse keepers at an annual convention. It means that those people who rely on the social interaction in order to kind of keep themselves balanced and level-headed, that's why comedians are so prolific on social media, because without that we're not interactors. I mean, before social media was huge and I started comedy in the late 90s, your journey back, and sometimes 2 gigs, was just phone calls to other comics, chat to them, because you knew they were up, you knew they were driving or at home, and they had a gig, and you'd be this sort of twilight hour of interaction, because without it, you'd be so alone.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. So tell us, the first job then, what happened to it? I'm guessing you didn't become CEO.
I stayed in it. I went into that job, shook their hand, said I can do this. And I stayed there from 1991 to 2000. So I was there for 9 years.
Wow.
And in 1997, I started the hobby of stand-up comedy while I still had this job. And
why did you start? What made you decide to do comedy?
So I'm a big follower, and I don't know where it came from, of New Year's resolutions. And I was trying to push myself, because I always think to myself, I'm quite capable. I've got that leftover that sort of hangover of that sort of self-belief that my parents gave me from a very young age means I should try stuff and, you know, and give myself challenges. And in 1997, it was, I'm going to have a go at stand-up comedy. I think the reason being that I'd watched a little bit of it on TV and thought, you know, it's not so much I can do this, but I look at the people who do stand up and I thought they're having the best time. And I just thought, I want to be one of those people. I want to, and it didn't look like they had a huge amount of script. Obviously they had jokes. It didn't look like they had props or other people to work. And it kind of appealed to my, you can do this all yourself approach. You know, when I used to write computer games, I used to write the music, and I used to draw the graphics, and I used to design the story and come up with the names. And so there was no element of, I'm going to come this, I'm going to sub this out, or find a friend to do this. I wanted to do everything, and stand-up comedy was another one of those one-man band things that really appealed to me. So yeah, that was my motivation. And also I'd been to a few gigs. When I was in my late teens, I went and saw Eddie Izzard at what was known as the Crocodile, and it's the Concord Club in Brighton. And there was an effortless sort of majesty to how he did it. And I'd seen Boothby Graffo as well. And I thought to myself, you know, there are people sat here right now thinking that person is amazing. And yet I'm totally in the belief that I could do what they're doing. Yeah. But I didn't know if I was funny. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Like loads of comics are people who kind of like make their mates laugh and think, oh, they can go off and do this. And I knew that I knew I could hold court. I knew I could keep people's attention and be engaging. And I knew I had funny ideas. But the person who I made laugh more than anyone was myself, not really anyone else.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting take on it, because I've always been fascinated with like people think, well, you're comedians, therefore you're funny all the time. Therefore, you just wake up and you start thinking funny, rather than how you're coming across it with this very considered decision to start something as a New Year's resolution. My mate's New Year's resolution was to have a pickled onion in a pint every month of the year. And we're currently traveling around trying to find places to do this. And it's as disgusting as it sounds, yeah.
We're just going to a pub, order a pickled onion, put it in a pint.
Pickled egg in a pint, yeah.
And then you would swallow it whole or eat it while it's in there?
You down the pint and eat the egg, yeah.
It's a New Year's resolution it's a bit like the endurance stuff when people say, oh, I'm gonna try and stand on one leg for 30 minutes. And of course the answer is always why.
Yeah,
you know,
it just seemed like a good idea at the time, which, you know, for a lot of comics that I've met, they stumbled into it, and it's that you've made a considered decision to do it. Where was your first gig? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a place called the Good Companions in Brighton. It was a function room above a pub near the Brighton station, and it was an all open mics, and people were doing poetry, and some people were doing comedy songs. And I was 23, and I turned up in this bright orange shirt and a pair of jeans, and I did what I thought was 5 minutes material. It was closer to 10. No concept of how long anything took, and it went brilliantly. And I just thought, oh God, this is amazing! I'm going to be a star. And then I went back the following week and did something similar, and that went brilliantly. And I just thought, wow. That's my job then. Anyway, and I went back the third time and I did a mix with the first two, and I died. God, it was just awful. And that is when I became obsessed with comedy, because up until then it was thinking, hey, I can be a performer. And then it was like the scientist in my head went, how can you do the same jokes to ostensibly the same people in definitely the same space on the same night of the week, and it be brilliant one week and not the next? And of course we take that for granted now, but let's approach this from a science point of view. That makes zero sense. And I've just become fascinated in why is it that this thing that I was looking to do could have such an incredible broad spectrum of responses, from a room full of strangers thinking you're incredible to exactly the same room of strangers thinking you're Mark. Yeah.
It's interesting. If I could just hold that thought for a second, just to anyone who's joining us now on YouTube or Insta or any social media outlets, or listening on mensradiostation.com or Deluxe radio network, I'm here with the exceptionally talented Stephen Grant. Want to just give a quick shout out to our sponsors, the WJ Group, who are the UK's leading road marking and highways maintenance company. They're really good. They are very supportive of everything I do, so I appreciate them very much. And also, they just want something different, so they always look for different things to do. And as Stephen will get onto, one of the things that we have as comics is a skill set that allows us to go into different areas if we've got the wherewithal to do it. So, Steve, you just mentioned your first gig and how that went. What then made you not quit after that one where you failed?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the first two went brilliantly. The third one went terribly, and that made me even more obsessed. And then it was just a question of finding what worked and what didn't, and understanding why it didn't, and also kind of realizing that what you said made a difference. And you could upset people, you could invigorate people, you could kind of you had a platform, and I found that really what's the word? I just found it I wasn't motivating, but I found it empowering, and I would say I was sort of fairly addicted right from the get-go. And making people laugh is a great feeling, because it makes connections, it makes people happy. It's a buzz to receive a laugh. It's a proper drug. I remember talking to new acts when they used to come and do my big club in Brighton when I used to run the Comedia, and they'd come off and I'd love talking to them in that first 10-20 seconds, and I go, it's good, isn't it? And they'd be like, oh my God, it's amazing, and it's just, you'd be there for their first tango, and it's brilliant.
So then you carried on doing it, and then you got signed up with an agent, and then the future's bright. You're a bit of a golden boy. You got the club. You can compare, you can headline, you've got it all, mate. What kept you going?
Well, firstly, I always felt like I could be better. I mean, talking about New Year's resolutions, it's not quite a pickled egg in a pint, but I definitely felt like, well, first of all, artistically, comedy gives you lots of avenues to try and push yourself, and the Edinburgh Festival is definitely one of them. This idea, the fact that you're getting up there and you're doing 10 minutes and jokes and making people laugh, great. Do 20 minutes and you can weave in a few stories. But in Edinburgh, you can go up and do an hour, and that hour is not just an hour of jokes, though people do go up and do an hour of jokes and get massacred for it usually, because people's threshold for listening to just an hour of jokes isn't great. But you can actually talk about serious topics, and you can weave in opinions and ideas that the standard format of a comedy club wouldn't allow you. And so, artistically, the industry gives you opportunities to really push yourself as a live performer. So once I was, regularly doing 20-minute slots and getting laughs for it, and comparing everywhere, and really trying to push the boundaries of what a good compare was, making great connections, showing how improvising doesn't just have to be the joke based on what they say. It can be a kind of a building, a structure based on a variety of things that people have come back with, and setting the mood and stuff. And I find that, and also I find that challenge wonderful, because the whole thing about comparing is being the person who talks to the audience first and foremost, is that you don't know what you're going to get. So it shows you how able you are to weave in stories and ideas off the top of your head, because you're working with the material that you didn't know about beforehand, which is the audience. And then on top of that, you're rewarding a crowd with live performance, because otherwise, if you're just rattling off jokes you've rehearsed, you could watch the TV. So live is imperative, so you've got to be a live element to your act. So that connection was still quite a bit of a buzz. I like the status of being a stand-up comic. I love the artistic boundaries, or at least not so much boundaries, but the artistic challenges that came with being doing comedy. But also there was an element of ambition early days. I was working alongside people who were kind of making those inroads into the world of television and other sort of, if you like, high profile areas. And I felt like that would be a validation of my talent. Incorrectly, I might add. But certainly it was something that, I was aiming for.
So it's fascinating the way that you kind of deconstruct it and the way that you look at it all. Were you then focused fully on comedy, or were you still maintaining friendships, relationships outside of comedy? Did the two go hand in hand?
Handful. I mean, I have probably 3 really good friends who predate comedy. and they are good to the point where actually 2 of them I saw 3 days ago. And I haven't seen them for a good year because, well, partly because of lockdown, partly because I live in Plymouth and it's a long old way. But I took a gig in Plymouth, even though the money it paid, I think, just about covered the fuel there and back. Immediately, the fuel there and back is phenomenal. It wasn't a bad paying gig. It's just a very far journey, and I did it so I could go and see my friends and see them. And they predate, but they were friends of mine who were there when I was going, I'm going to be a comedian. I'm going to write some jokes. I'm going to try these jokes out on you. And so they've been there for the long haul. The rest of my social groups are almost entirely to do with comedy. I mean, I always think that the way to tell this, by the way, if you ask this question of anybody, if you interview on this genre or this of it, is just get them to go onto their WhatsApp and look at the last 20 messages or iMessage or whatever they use. And so here we go. So my last 20 people, and this is from the top. So ex-wife, Robert Frankenathan. So there we go. Look, yeah. So let's do it. So here we go. Look, I'm not going to be giving anything away. Right. So yeah. So ex-wife, Romesh, Jen Brister, someone who works from the comedy, Nick Page comedy, the club I work with. That's the first 6. Okay. So that's another comedian, girlfriend, technicians, friends. There's friends that I'm out there. Another promoter, another comedian group, climbing partner, another comedian. Okay, so Charlie Baker, they go comedian, Dave Fensom, comedy admin, comedian. This is a guy runs a gig, another comedian. Oh, and then best friend I saw in Plymouth down there, Emily. So I'd say it's 3/4 comics that I talk to all the time, or stuff related to comedy.
I've got two comedians. Tucker snuck in at the end there. Two out of the 20.
2 out of the 20. I'd say 15 out of the 20.
The other one, Aideen, I was only talking to her because I was trying to get her to suggest some acts I could book for a gig. Otherwise, I would have just have had Tucker in there, and that was only because I bought an orange. And I don't know anyone else who eats oranges.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Tucker, I just bought an orange, mate.
So I mean, it's you know, but the irony of it is I've just looked at those messages, and one of them is from Jen Brister, done Live at the Apollo, done Frankie Boyle's, great comic, fabulous. And she was saying still on for tomorrow, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not gigging with her tomorrow. And then I realised,
someone you're going to see, does she?
No. She. The reason why I'm seeing her tomorrow is because she's got her kids and I've got my kids, and it's half term, and so we're going to go to the park or something.
Don't let get you in the sea, mate.
Proves the point, doesn't it? That my social groups are now wrapped up in comedy, and people go, "Oh, look at you with your showbiz mates and all the rest of it." But it's not. It's comedians are of a certain disposition and ilk, and sometimes other comics are the people who get it. And so say things are going badly, or I'm just upset or stressed about something, or worst of all, this is going to seem so minor, but it isn't. It's when I tell people I'm tired, and they go, "But you only work 20 minutes a day," and it's this little part of me sits there and just goes, and then it goes, and they go, "Oh, but is it writing, rehearsing?" And you kind of want to say yes, but it isn't. It's not. It's sorting out the life around it. It's logistics. It's turning up an hour and a half before the gig. It's going an hour and a half after it. It's making sure someone's looking after your kids when you do that gig. It's making sure it's running your life. It's invoicing. It's phoning people up to get the gigs in the first place.
I think it's being fully immersed, isn't it? In that, I remember having a barbecue, and do you remember Andre King, the big Kiwi guy? Yeah. Andre came, and Jerry Kay came. And then there was about 100 people, and Jerry was like, "Where's all the other comics?" I went, "He's there. That's him. There. That's it." And then they kind of started having a chat about gigs and all the rest of it. And then Andre's wife pulled him away, and Jerry ended up talking about football to people. So it's about I've never really lived in that comedy world, but I've always kind of been on the edge of it and noticed how little cliques and groups form. With nothing in common other than the comedy thing. And then when it doesn't work out, or they don't achieve what some of their peers have done, watching the disappointment and the coping strategies that come with it. I mentioned at the start that I honestly, hand on heart, believe you are as capable as McIntyre, Jimmy Carr, any of those. And I think most of your peers would say that.
But that's the point, isn't it? Because well, actually, McIntyre's a poor example, I think, maybe because McIntyre is excellent, but he's starting from a basis not hugely differently from me. But a mixture of work ethic, focus, and ability to elevate where the rest of us may not find that narrow vision.
No, you have that. But I think where you differ is that, and it's just, you know, my knowledge of you is that you were not as selfish or self-driven. Like you say, you'd listen to an open spot, you'd listen to a new act, you would suggest material when people come off stage. I always got the feeling from you that you wanted people to do well, everyone to have a brilliant gig, then it's a brilliant gig. Whereas Michael always wants to be the best on the bill kind of thing.
Oh yeah, no, and Michael was, when I compared and Michael was there, and I would be having a good gig and I'd go out, I'd talk to the audience, I'd find some little facts, I'd weave something clever and funny and get a laugh. And then I'd bring Michael on, and then Michael walk on and goes, so who Stephen spoke to then? You, let's find something funnier. And he'd delve in and he'd do it to prove a point that even though they thought I was good, they needed to realize he was great. And that's because he was just born to compete. You know, the reason why he's the best is because he couldn't live with himself if he wasn't. But the thing about it is, right, I really admire the skill. It's just amazing. There's no doubting he's not the best, right?
No,
and
I agree.
Ambition is off the scale. But the problem with ambition, and ambition is, do you know what? Ambition and arrogance are two misunderstood personality traits in comedy. And arrogance is given too much negativity and ambition is given too much positivity, because arrogance comes from self-belief. And we know a lot of arrogant people who are lovely. And that arrogance is not about pushing people down around them. It's about the fact that if you take away that defense mechanism of knowledge of their brilliance, then the doubt creeps in and everybody fails, right? And I can live with arrogance. I've met arrogant people and it comes across in their personality, and I know they mean no malice by it, but the belief is in every part of them. But the flip side is ambition. And this, you know, this industry is still a pyramid. It's very wide at the bottom and it's very tall. It starts off like Belgium and it ends like the Burj Khalifa, right? Because the person out there earning 10 times what I do is 10% funnier. They're funnier. That's not in any doubt. But they're earning a huge amount because there are other elements, and they're doing incredibly well because they've brought all the bits together. But are they, you know, there's nothing linear between income or visibility or Instagram followers and skill. Yeah, better, absolutely. But it's exponential in other places and almost flat in others. But the reality of it is ambition, that need to be better than where you are, has made a lot of very good comics who are very fundamentally happy people unhappy. Because if you're constantly looking up and going, why aren't I there? Then you're giving yourself reason to beat yourself up. And balance is being happy where you are without having to look down and then punch down. You know, it's a bit like when your mum turns to you when you're 8 and you don't know eat your peas, and she goes, "Oh, kids starving in the third world," and you go, "Well, send them the peas. I don't want the peas," right? But really, what's happening is you kind of got to go, I've got to be grateful for what I've got, and that gratitude has to manifest itself into happiness, because if not, the ambition will tear me apart. And I had a meteoric rise early on in my career because I was good at what I was doing, and I found comedy straightforward. Once I learned it and did it, I didn't find the initial hurdle was particularly tricky. But that ambition made me maybe unhappy, you know, not desperate. You know, I wasn't sat there watching the television and suddenly go to an ad break. And we know what it's like. 5 ad breaks have come up and 4 of them would feature comics that we work alongside. And we go, how'd they get that? How'd they get that? How'd they get that? You know, it just make you insane.
I have car insurance. I could do that.
Well, you know, like Jo Enright. We've both worked with Jo Enright. She's a lovely girl. Yeah. Good comic, you know.
Number 21 today. Number 21.
Number 21. There you go on the list, right? And Jo Enright would be selling citrons, you know, and we would go, but like I could do that. I could, you know, and why haven't I got that phone call? Why can't I do it? Well, I tell you why Jo's got it is because she probably put herself forward. She probably had the right agent, and on top of that, you put her next to a citron, and the car looks huge because she's right. All right, and you know, and so, but because that ambition would And of course, you'd want to do better than everybody at everything, and nobody can do that because you can't be doing everything. And then you go, and then you lie in bed at 3 a.m. and go, well, I should focus on this. This is my strength. I should do this. And you try and be your own director, and you tell yourself what to do. And actually, because what we do is so difficult and the industry is so volatile, the thing to do is what makes you happy, because then that way, when everything else isn't going okay, you're still pleased with it. And it's and I've seen a lot of good people become not pleasant company because the ambition is
it becomes bitterness, doesn't it?
It's dissolving them. Whereas actually, put me in a room with McIntyre and I don't know, I'm trying to think of other people in that sort of kind of, I don't know, maybe John Bishop, possibly, I don't know. There was a lot of American comics like that who have that, even the, if you like, the Tom Stage, the Craig Campbells of the world, whose kind of inner belief is so huge, you know, and I'll be with a friend and they'll go, well, they're quite arrogant. And I say, do you know what? They probably are. I don't even see it.
Yeah, but do you not think if you met Cristiano Ronaldo, he might not be a really good conversationist because all his effort.
Because he's good at comedy. And sorry, he's good at football. He's good at football, isn't he? Cristiano Ronaldo is good at football. That's the whole point, isn't it? I mean,
so those
good at
attributes they have,
beings.
Those attributes they have, they kind of help them succeed in what they're doing. So then, when it comes to Stephen Grant, who, like I said at the start, you're a great compere, you can open, you can close, you're a great writer, you put on good gigs. Where you then get to a point in your life when you realise, well, maybe I'm not going to be the McIntyre or the Jimmy Carr or whatever. That
came and went. I mean, that's about 5-6 years ago, I think. You know, we all look to the. If you're curious and if you're listening to this and you're wondering, how does it work in the comedy industry? Does some highfalutin producer come along and clutch you? Well, it could happen like that, but it doesn't. You tend to make your own niche. Everybody's got the ability to sort of bang out their own content. The chances are every single person that you saw that you thought got plucked from obscurity was beating that drum for that specific job for 10-15 years beforehand. And we point at people who went on to be huge later in their life, like Mickey Flanagan. Was 42 when he was nominated for newcomer at the Edinburgh Fringe, and Dave Johns, you know, went on to win, you know, in Cannes in the film festival in his 60s, and you were just as likely to be alongside him doing a gig in his late 50s. He didn't but that he was you know, and it all came from the fact that in Edinburgh in 2007, 5, something like that, I don't know, maybe he was as well as doing his stand-up show, he got a load of people together, sort of comics theatre, and he wrote and acted alongside Christian Slater in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which gave him a lot of profile. But he then wasn't, 3 months later, he wasn't in Hollywood. You know, 8 years later, he was casting for something in Hollywood, you know, and it's the nature of the beast is that the bigger the project, the longer it takes to happen. So those meteoric rises are very surprising.
One of the best bits of advice I ever got, and as you know, a lot of comics spend a lot of time giving you advice, was from Nick Coppin, of all people. Nick Coppin, who's not internationally known, but now lives in himself. I was new, he was headlining, and I said, I'd only done 10 gigs. Have you got any tips? And he said, never quit. Don't take time out to write. Don't take a career break, because people will forget you. If you just keep going, people will have seen your name, heard your name, know your name, and you may get work. Now, I took his advice, and he didn't. He took a year out. And even now, when I see him, he'll go, I should have listened to myself, really.
Well, I mean, actually, his advice is not bad. I try and remember the guy. He moved to Belgium for 2 years with his partner. She got a great job. And he used to have a joke about being at traffic lights and there being a policeman opposite and the policeman doing this.
Yeah.
And then he shouts out, "You called me up," or whatever like that. And he goes, "No, I was telling you to put the seatbelt on." Anyway, I'm trying to remember who the comic is anyway. But anyway, he took 2 years out and when he came back and he was really average. And everyone was like, kind of, well, what happened there? And I goes, well, because it's a dynamic industry. If you go off and do something else, you come back to where you were. It was.
You're just going to bug us now. You're going to be number 22 on my list. So I'll message you at 1 in
Well, it'll come to me and I'll message you about it.
So a lot of things you've alluded to, right, about being competitive, about wanting to be better. And then, so how then do you cope when it's not going well? When you get them dark times or them low times? You've said about having friends who are comedians because they understand you. But
Yeah.
is there something that you do that maybe other people could go, I could try that when I'm having a tough time?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm saying things going badly. I suffer. I have a lot going on in my life. Other stuff, family and work and health, and I take on a lot work wise, stress wise. I feel like I'm constantly pushing that sort of stranger at the door a little bit, and but exercise, yeah. I mean, exercise has been an absolute. It's been a result for me. I mean, it's everyone who exercises will tell other people to exercise. It's not for everyone, and there's not always a solution. It's not always a solution. However, for me, it gave me focus. It gave me a break from what I'm doing. It's made me sort of look better and feel better, but also it's good for mental health. And actually, I think the problem is a lot of people hear about other people exercise. Oh, I'm great because I run every morning, and that's why I feel so happy. And then they try it and they don't feel happy, and they think, well, why would I bother? This is rubbish. But the reality of it is that it's for some people it's about feeling good, but for me and for a lot of other people, and it's not talked about as much, it's about not feeling bad. This doesn't give me highs; it insures against the lows. When I'm fit and when I'm exercising, my lows just are small dips. They're not chasms, and it just gives me an insurance against it.
No, I think that's a really good bit of advice. I'm still getting over Jen Brister telling me to go and swim in the sea in cold water, but you go, no, that is never going to happen, mate.
No, I wouldn't do that. I've tried it. I mean, I've tried it. I've got into cold water because people say try the water, and what happens is you freezing, and I always think a lot of difficult sport is done by people because it's so you have to focus so much of yourself on it that you can't think about your problems. It's a bit like sawing off a leg in order to not worry about a headache, because all of a sudden you don't worry about the headache because the bigger problem is you've sawn off your leg. And so it's like, I'm not into exercise for exercise's sake. I'm not competitive. I virtually never enter any kind of cycling or running event that is sort of timed. And the only person I'm ever trying to beat is myself and be a better version of myself. And if I'm out on the bicycle, it's usually because it's a really lovely day. I mean, I will cycle when it's cold and I'll just put on more clothes, and I will cycle sometimes when it's wet, though not very far. And I know that if I don't exercise for 4 or 5 days, I start feeling a bit like I've got to do something myself. So the lockdown was excellent for me because, I had this great big tsunami of doubt that came with, is comedy ever coming back? And then it was completely pushed back by the ability that I had so many more hours in the day to go and exercise. And if you remember 2020, yeah, fair enough. We were the world pandemic was a worrying place, but the weather was lovely.
Yeah.
It was a really lovely year. The weather was great. So I was out on the bike, having a great time. And also that there was no cars for the first 3 4 weeks. Right.
It was great.
You could smell.
People of Brighton loved it.
Houses, they'd have their windows open. You could smell what they were making for lunch and for dinner, because there was no fumes and there was no distant road noise. And I was like, I'm just gutted I didn't do things like cycle down motorways because they were empty. So yeah, I mean,
leave that.
I will look back on the pandemic as kind of instrumental in big changes to my career, but also as a wonderful time of exploration and discovery. So yeah,
mate, that's you lovely. Just very briefly, because we're nearly run out of time, mate. What's next for Stephen Grant? What's your plans?
Well, it's huge change for me after 23 years of running Comedia. They again, come to an end. Theaters had a rough time of it as well. A lot of them had to try and fund money from elsewhere, and a lot of them had to try and change all their organization. Comedia as a company laid off everybody with the exception of the bosses, and then started from the ground up, and as a part of that also decided to terminate all their existing contracts, including with me. So that was a big shock to the system. I dealt with it in the same way as I remember dealing with the venues shutting in March. I stood over the sink eating a massive bar of chocolate, staring into the middle distance, going, "What happens now?" Chocolate is a large part of my coping, by the way. I should have mentioned it.
Okay.
And then I just thought, well, maybe I'll look back on this and think, wish this happened earlier. So, I've started my own venue. Instead of working along hand in hand with one, I found a place. I've got a team on board. It's huge amount of work. Years of thinking bosses do nothing. You know what? They're right. Bosses don't do any work. They're so busy organizing everything, they can't actually do the work. And that's what I'm doing. But I'm also doing the work as well. So it's 16-hour days. It's exhausting. I barely have time for anything, but it's called the Forge Comedy Club in Brighton, and I'm opening a few other little ones to go hand in hand with it around everywhere. It's very small volume at now, but the plan is there for it to kind of expand, and if it doesn't happen, then I gave it a go. I'm getting to that stage in my life now where I'm doing things because if I don't, then I probably won't ever do them. And
Fantastic.
This is one of those.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Steve, mate. I could talk to you all night. Insightful. Engaging. Really wish you the best of luck with the Forge.
Sure.
And hopefully I'll see you at some stage, man.
Yeah, no doubt. We always will see each other at some point, and so that will definitely happen. And when we say see you soon, we don't know if it's going to be next week or in 3 years. But as Nick Coppin says, you never leave.
Never leave.
Hotel California is the gig that never ends.
Speak soon, mate. You take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. So Stephen Grant, an absolutely fantastic guest. I could speak to him for ages. Just honest, refreshing, insightful. For those of you who don't know him, the guy is massively well known on the circuit. And as I've said a few times, he's easily in the same company as the very top echelons of British comedy. It doesn't always work out for people. Maybe his journey will take him higher up in years to come. As he said, Mickey Flanagan was unknown for years before becoming an overnight success 20 years after he started. Dave Johns, another one, was in his 60s when finally got the accolades that we all thought he deserved and was very, very worthy of. But as Stephen pointed out, there are times when it can go a bit wrong, and it can go a bit wrong. And let's be honest, most people have dark times in their lives, and when they do, what do you do? One of the big, big lessons in life is please don't ever think it can't happen to you. We gently tiptoe around the topic of mental well-being because I don't want to force it down people's throats. But each week my guests talk about their lives, and in doing so, give us an insight into their own well-being, their own wellness, and how they cope, what they do to cope. One of the interesting things for me tonight to hear from Stephen was about how he always wanted to be better, and he always wants to do better. And that's something that very much fits in with my beliefs. I always want to challenge myself with kind of higher expectation. I don't put so much pressure on myself that it's unrealistic to achieve, but I do always want to do a bit better. So if I do a gig for 1,000 people, I want to do a gig for 2,000 people. I do a radio show, I want to do 2 radio shows. It's whatever works for you to keep your mind focused and to keep you entertained. One of the things that constantly fascinates me is that people don't realize how simple and quickly things can go wrong. It does happen to more people than you ever know. If ever you do feel down or you're in trouble or you can't cope, if you're able to reach out to a friend, then do. A relative, a neighbor, workmate, then do. If you can't, then there are places to go and get help. I do mention them every show because I think they do an absolutely wonderful job. I don't work for them. I don't get paid by them. But I do think Time to Change are just a phenomenal organization because they're all about ending mental health discrimination. So we don't want to have them and us, you and I. We just want to have we. Different people have different experiences of their wellness and their well-being. And it strikes people in different ways with different impacts. I'm just going to ask you just to consider what you would do if you did feel unwell or if you did feel that you needed help. Because like I say, don't think it can't happen to you. While you're in a good place, think about maybe having an action plan or something you can do. If I feel down, I'm going to go listen to music, or I'm going to go watch a film, or I'm going to go exercise, or I'm going to ring a friend, or I'm going to do something. And when you're in a good place, that may be of use to you when times do get tough. Or it might just be useless. But you know what? At least it'll give you something to do while you're not watching the television. Every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, mensradiostation.com and womensradiostation.com have shows and presenters that do really, really great work raising the awareness of well-being and wellness. But also the website's got a lot of good information on it, mensradiostation.com. I just plugged my own little website, happytohealthyou.com. We use comedy and humor to raise awareness and destigmatize not just mental well-being, but men's health and women's health as well. All of us that work in this area live in hope of a time when things are easier for people who are struggling. And we also live in hope that we can be part of making the difference and helping people. I mean, if you are struggling, please, like I keep saying, don't suffer on your own. It's not something you have to go through on your own. We'll be back next week. You take care. Until then, good night.